Jeff, I'm seeing just wanted to let you know that I'm seeing a shadow on your screen. It's like
Okay.
your camera is blocked. There we go.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Elville webinar series. And today's webinar, Achieving Perfection for Your Legacy, Intentionalism in Estate Planning, presented by Elville and Associates Managing Principal and Lead Attorney, Stephen Elville. My name is Jeff Stauffer, Community Relations Director with Elville and Associates, and I'll be moderating today's event. So how this will work today, if you're new to our webinars, if you are, welcome. We're glad you're here. You as the attendee are in listen-only mode. However, if and when you have questions, please note them in the questions panel on the right-hand portion of your screen, and we will take time throughout the presentation to address them. Your questions really do help the presentation and add value. They do help others learn, so please don't be shy in posing your questions at any time. You did receive the presentation yesterday by email from me to take notes on it if you wish. If for some reason you did not receive the presentation from me, it is available in the section marked handouts in the panel on your screen to download at this time. Also, for CFPs, CPAs, and various other professionals on today's webinar, you may receive 1.5 continuing education hours for attending. Per my attendance records requirements, please email me your ID number, and for CFPs only, I also must have the last 4 digits of your social security number as soon as possible so I can submit your CE hours for approval. Everyone will also receive a post-webinar feedback email right after the presentation, and we ask, that you please take 2 minutes to fill out this simple survey to offer us your feedback about the presentation. We read every comment and value your feedback for us. It's also an ideal time to request a consultation with Steve for any planning needs that your family may have. And we always look forward to being a resource to you here at Elville and Associates now and in the future. So briefly, I'd like to offer you an overview about our firm and share a little bit with Steve, your presenters today. So Elville and Associates, you can see my screen, I think you can. I'm Managing Principal and Lead Attorney here at Elville and Associates for the past about 11 years. We offer a number of different practice areas here at Elville and Associates, which include estate and special needs planning, elder law and elder care planning, estate and trust administration, business law and succession planning, guardianship and litigation, and tax planning and asset protection. We have 7 attorneys, 12 staff members in 5 locations, and Steve and I are coming to you live from the Columbia Gateway location here. Our mission, as it always has been and always will be, is to offer practical solutions to our clients' needs through counseling, education, and the use of superior legal technical knowledge. We do offer a lot of education here at Elville and Associates, and that's through our planning processes we offer through with our clients. We also offer over 100 educational webinars and workshops in the communities we serve each year, and also by way of our accredited client care program, or CCP as we call it here at the firm. We are one of only 2 firms in Maryland to have a CCP accredited by the Client Care Academy in Boston. It's a program that offers a lot of very robust benefits and offers planning that works, as we like to say here at the firm. So if you want to learn more about that, you can reach out to me or our firm's legal administrator, Mary Gay Kramer, and we'll talk a little bit about that in our presentation today as well. A little bit more about Steve briefly. So Steve's work as an attorney for the past 20+ years has been centered in elder law, special needs planning, and estate planning, with an emphasis in the areas of tax planning and asset protection. A member of a number of different professional organizations, such as the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, the Academy of Special Needs Planners, and the National Network of Estate Planning Attorneys. He works to bring peace of mind to clients by creating solutions to their needs through counseling, client education, and the use of leading-edge legal technical knowledge. Last year, chair of the Elder Law and Disability Rights Section Council of the Maryland State Bar Association. A very seasoned speaker, presenting at many webinars, workshops for businesses and their employees, conferences, and continuing education events each year, and also named to the Maryland Super Lawyers list for a 6th time in 2021. So congratulations to Steve. And also had a feature story written about him in the National Super Lawyers magazine, about the Elville Center for the Creative Arts, which is our firm's charitable organization he founded in 2014. And I'm very privileged to be the executive director of for the past 6 years, maybe 7 at this point. So if you want to learn more about the Elville Center, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to share our story and the work that we do with schools and other organizations in the communities that we serve. So with all that said, Steve, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And I'm going to go ahead and share the button that's going to give you the presenter rights. Give me 1 second. You should see that pop up right now.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Get myself situated here and start the slideshow. All right, I'm just going to test here. Very good. Thank you, Jeff. And good morning, everyone. And I appreciate you spending your time this morning on this Wednesday, September 15th. It's hard to believe it's September. I'm sure you can agree with me on that. And not to mention that it's September 15th. So good morning and welcome to this presentation. And I always want to start by thanking my good friend and colleague, Jeff Stauffer, who is the moderator here. And Jeff is a wonderful professional. He will take care of you throughout this presentation and your questions, and we'll try to provide answers today or after today, depending on what your questions may be. Jeff, I just wanted to make one comment. I did make some final revisions to the presentation just to update the presentation. And if you did not upload the presentation as of this morning, or even if you did, I would encourage you to go ahead and access the presentation that you're going to see now, just slightly changed, so that you have all of the current slides. So wherever you said that was, Jeff, people on the call can access that and get the latest presentation. It is a wonderful time of year, and if you're as busy as Jeff and I, which I'm sure you are, you're just probably asking yourself, gosh, here we go again toward the holidays and the fall. So we're very blessed to be busy, as I'm sure you are, but we want to take a few minutes this morning to talk about trying to achieve perfection in your estate planning or in your legacy planning. And what a beautiful day that we have to be able to do that. So I'm sitting here in conference room 1 at Elville and Associates. I'm looking out at a beautiful sunny day, and wherever you are, I hope that you're having the same weather. And that reminds me that there are some of you possibly on this call that are not in Maryland today, or you don't even live in Maryland. So if that's the case, I want you to know that a lot of what we're going to talk about today is universal. It doesn't apply just to Maryland, and it would apply to your approach to your estate planning wherever you live and whoever the professionals are that you work with. So again, I welcome you, and we're going to get right into the material. Now, as I get started, as you may know if you've seen me speak before, I like to always say that many of the presentations that Jeff and I put on together are a culmination of my experience and kind of personify, what I would consider the most important things to share with you based on my experience. And this particular subject is very near and dear to my heart and to Jeff's and all of us here at Elville and Associates, because we believe in educating clients and working towards this perfection, as many of the advisors who may be on this webinar call this morning also believe in. So that's what we believe in, but that certainly is not the norm. So I just want you to know that. What you're going to see today is not what I would call normal, because if we want to achieve perfection, we have to go outside the box. We have to go outside the norm. So I just want you to know that that is what you are getting ready to see this morning. So as we get started, let's just go to the first slide. And as we see what we're getting ready to actually get into this morning, you're going to see that a lot of what I'm going to discuss, if not all of it, is highly non-technical. So many times we have workshops and we're talking about the technical aspects of planning, the technical aspects with the CPAs and advisors that are on the call, taxes, financial investments, all of those technical things. This is a largely non-technical presentation. This is a philosophical discussion that I hope has enough power to live well beyond the hour that we will spend together this morning. And so here we go. and thank you for being here. So what we're going to talk about here this morning is why being intentional. We're going to talk about this word intentionality, or intentionalism, as I have coined the phrase. Why being intentional in estate planning actually matters. Understanding the risks in estate planning. Oh yes, there are risks in estate planning. And of course, that is going to be a term I'm using within the context of estate planning. Of course, there are greater risks in having no estate planning, but I'm talking about there are risks even in the confines of estate planning. We want you to know what it is that you want out of estate planning. What is your goal? All planning is goal driven. That is the mantra. That's what we believe in here, and we know you believe in that as well. But it takes sometimes focus to realize if we're trying to get from point A to point B, what is our goal? Something very simple, something very non-technical, but we need to know what that is. And to avoid estate planning failure, the actual collapse of our estate plan, inadvertently or because of just neglect, how can we avoid that? How can we be intentional? And we're going to talk about things that are not always pleasant. They're certainly not sexy to talk about. Maintenance and updating. Who wants to do maintenance and updating? Some of us enjoy it, some of us don't, but that's so important. We're going to talk about that as part of achieving perfection. And we're going to talk about the importance of partnership, the importance of working together towards a common goal. Now, why being intentional in estate plan matters? Well, for some of you, this is preaching to the choir, and for others of you, this is going to be kind of a thought process that is of what I would call first impression. This is the first time you've ever thought about these kinds of things. Well, think about it. Randomness, and I like to just use that strong word, randomness. Randomness can actually kill your estate planning. It can kill, of course, in real life as well. If we just take random actions, it can kill our initiative, it can kill us physically, it can kill the chances of something being successful. And estate planning being a process. And it's not always a process, and you're going to hear me use that word process throughout the presentation. Estate planning as a process gets rid of randomness, but just we need to recognize that this is not something that we can be random with. If we are naturally inclined to take random actions, or maybe we're just too busy to think through things, or we're too busy to have the time to think, that's something a year and a half or 2 years ago that Jeff and I started telling clients, we need to have time to think. If we don't have that, then we are either intentionally or unintentionally being random, and we don't want to do that. Estate planning intentionality means that we also understand the interplay between financial advisors and tax planning, community and estate planning lawyers. This is what we would call the collaboration of that team. And so many of the advisors on the call here this morning, if there are, they understand this. They understand that this is important. They understand that it's also difficult to do, and it takes effort. It takes intentionality just to have this collaboration. The inability of an average person to access or assess, I apologize, I think that's a typo, that should say access. The inability of the average person to not only assess their situation, but to access the type of planning that they need. We need to understand that this is why intentionality matters. The average person does not have planning, and that's going to take me to the next bullet point. Estate planning statistics is so far of what we know, about 55% of people nationally, probably 65% or more of divorced people nationally have no estate planning. And that means that only the minority of people actually have estate planning. And of the minority of those people, the 45% or so to speak, of people who have no estate planning, that do have estate planning, of that minority, only a certain amount of those people actually will update their estate planning and achieve perfection. So as a concept, perfection and intentionality in estate planning, we are talking about something that is very, very difficult to attain. And for those of you who are committed to this and you're committed to walk down this path, You can do it, but remember what I just said. The average person has no estate planning. The majority of people in this country, the minority of people in this country, 45% or less, do have estate planning in some form, but only a certain number of them, and I would say only maybe 1/3 to 1/2 will actually achieve this kind of good estate planning. So this is a goal. It's a mountain to climb to get there. Estate planning collapse is prevalent. So think about the people who have no estate planning, the 55%, and think about the 2/3 that I just estimated, the 2/3 or at least 50% of those who do planning, their planning does not end up working the way that it should. So we want to prevent this collapse, but intentionality, is it important? Absolutely it is. And we have an unknowing public. We have a public that really is largely uneducated about estate planning concepts. It doesn't matter how much wealth a person has, it seems. Our experience is that wealthy clients and people of modest wealth, or people of on the low end of the spectrum of wealth, the education level as far as estate planning doesn't seem to be much different in those categories, believe it or not. So we need to, if we're advisors on this call, we need to educate and take care of our clients to help them achieve this perfection. If you're a non-advisor, if you're a client or a prospective client, we need to work toward this perfection as a lifelong pursuit. And I know that's a tall mountain to climb, but I'm just trying to set the stage, and I'm just trying to set your expectation. This is truly something that we have to be intentional about. Now, most people are searching for perfection, in my opinion. They may or may not consciously know this, but who would want to have an intentional failure? Who would not want their legacy to be secure? Who would not want to take care of their relatives and there are people, I'll be honest, there are some people, but those are the vast minority of people who really don't care. But most of us, I really honestly believe, have goals and values, dreams and aspirations. We do care about what happens to our loved ones. We do care about what happens to ourselves in the event of incapacity. So I do believe most people, consciously or not, are seeking this kind of solid perfection. And again, we want to help those who want to achieve it follow a path to get there. Now let's talk about understanding risks in estate planning. So we've talked about why people should seek perfection in estate planning, and we've talked about a little bit of the hazards, but let's really get into some of these risks. And I would say one of the big ones is a lack of a proper beginning. Many of us have heard stories or read books or heard talks about having a proper beginning, and that is very, very true in estate planning. There could be problems with the beginning. What if a person unknowingly, because remember we have a largely uneducated and unknowing public about estate planning, what if they were to be referred or end up with an estate planning attorney or a general practice attorney that either doesn't have a process, doesn't educate clients, doesn't take care of clients, doesn't work well with financial advisors and CPAs? You know, we have kind of a bad beginning right there. So this problem of proper selection, proper referral, and the proper beginning, this is one of the risks of estate planning. And we in the advisory community, we ought to be thinking about ways, and this webinar is one of those ways. We want to be thinking about ways of educating people about how to avoid this. This is one of the fundamental problems, in my opinion, as I look back on my career. Lack of process. We talked about process. What if there is no process? There's just randomness in the process, or there's just documents that are handed to clients, or clients are given documents and signed documents that they don't understand. They don't know what's available to them because there's been no process, or the process is just mechanically not functioning. There is no funding and alignment. So I'm going to get down to some of these other bullet points here in just a second. Lack of partnership. There is no conception, let's say, that a good relationship with the financial professionals, the tax professionals, and the estate planning lawyer professionals, that this partnership is really what gives the planning energy, it gives it synergy, it gives it scope, it gives it power because of the collaborative minds that are involved, providing the client with the next bullet point, education. So a lack of education is a risk. Someone can engage in estate planning and not really ever be educated as to the risks involved of this choice, or I didn't realize if I had assets titled this way that I could lose some of my assets in a lawsuit. I didn't realize my child could have been protected. I didn't realize I could prevent a remarriage situation that I was really trying to avoid. That kind of education on a fundamental level, even including incapacity planning, is very important. Failure of funding and alignment of assets. This subject is very near and dear to the heart of the financial advisors on the line. They see this day in and day out. And yet, I'm going to challenge my financial advisor friends on the call that sometimes the failure of funding and alignment of assets sometimes occurs on their end, because sometimes the financial advisory team and the estate planning team are not on the same page about what we're trying to achieve. Now, this is uncommon, but it does happen. So failure of funding and alignment of assets is one of the major risks in estate planning. For those of you who have never heard of that concept, that simply means that we have wonderful estate planning documents, let's say, whether that's a will-based plan, a revocable trust-based plan, or an irrevocable trust-based plan. That's also in addition to the basic documents. But the assets are not properly titled, the assets are not properly flowing, the business assets are not properly tied into the estate plan. All of those kinds of things have to do with the alignment of assets, and now the plan could fail. Failure of fiduciaries, failure of trustees, personal representatives, attorneys in fact under a power of attorney, healthcare agents, failure of adequate selection of guardians for minor children or adults that have special needs. Those kinds of fiduciary selections are critically important in today's world. So a failure of fiduciary selection is very much a possibility as a risk in estate planning. Fortunately, bullet point H down there, which I'll jump to very, very quickly, if we have no flexibility in the planning, this makes the failure of fiduciaries even more problematic. So if we have flexibility, which we've built in ways of dealing with, well, what if we have an inadequate fiduciary? Or what if the fiduciaries pass away? Or what if the fiduciaries refuse to serve? As long as we have flexibility based into the plan or built into the plan, we're not going to have to worry as much about a failure of fiduciaries. But lack of flexibility, failure of fiduciaries, these are risks. And then backing up to bullet point G there, estate planning is inadequate or limited in scope. So one of the risks is a person has an estate plan. It may not have ever been updated. The documents are limited. The documents have no flexibility. The documents are old, and that is not necessarily a problem, but the documents are old and they've never been updated as far as how assets pass to each other if we have a married couple. Perhaps estate tax and inheritance tax has never been considered in the documents. All kinds of ways that the documents could be inadequate, inflexible, outdated, or, for example, powers of attorney could be too limited. The powers in a trust could be too limited. All of these things are risks in estate planning. Now, Jeff, I'm going to stop just for a second. We've only been going for about 15 or 20 minutes, but I just want to see if there are any questions so far.
Thanks, Steve. No questions at this time.
Gotcha.
Really great stuff so far. I'm listening intently.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
I love this type of stuff.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. All right. And I didn't pay Jeff to say that. Thank you, Jeff. All right. So now we get to the kind of the second phase of our presentation, which is why knowing what you want. And this is talking about the goal-driven aspects of estate planning. Why knowing what you want matters. Okay. And what is your definition of estate planning? So again, at this point, I'm just going to remind us all, this is a non-technical presentation, but here I'm going to mention some of the technical aspects of planning and why a person would look at planning and once they're properly educated, and that's a key, be able to define what their goals are. Many people, of course, know what their goals are before they receive any further education, and then the education is just icing on the cake. But here, let's look at why this is important. Well, maybe a person wants to ensure that assets don't go to a new potential spouse. If I die first, I want to make sure my children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, or others are protected against a claim of a new spouse. And that is something that definitely could be a goal, especially for couples who are over 55 or 60. Protecting against the new spousal elective share law. This is an education issue that has to do with being intentional. Thinking through that issue. How can you be intentional if you're not educated about this issue and be able to think through it? So for those of you who are not aware of this, Maryland has a new spousal elective share law effective October 2020, about a year ago. And this new law protects spouses in the extreme. And it's not going to matter to most traditional spouses, but just know that years ago, and I'm going to say 30, 35 years ago, there were very few protections for spouses, and now there are very much great protections for spouses, surviving spouses. And this has implications for remarriage, where a new spouse might be able to get assets that you never intended for them to get. You intended for those assets to go to children and grandchildren. You have to be intentional about this to understand what to do to protect against that. You have to be intentional in the planning to plan for a spouse, or to also, let's say, make the choice that you don't care about that issue. So we are talking about being intentional. We're talking about education. Maybe a person's goal is to make sure that there are no estate or gift tax consequences, that there's not going to be any of that estate tax or gift tax. There's not going to be any inheritance tax, or if there is, that it can be minimized or eliminated. Believe it or not, there are strategies to be able to do that under certain circumstances with inheritance tax. Maybe that is the person's goal. Protecting retirement plan assets for beneficiaries. What do I want? Well, is this something I want to do? Well, now, in light of the Secure Act, which is the next bullet point, this is a subject where clients need to be educated and be intentional. Are we going to protect the shares of IRAs going to children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews by using a trust? If we're going to use a trust, now more than ever, we need to believe that that's a good idea versus no, that might have some great asset benefits, asset protection benefits, but it's too much of a complexity. It's too much tax that I'm going to have to deal with. And on the other hand, talking about here, this last bullet point, maybe the goal is to minimize the effects of the Secure Act. So not only to learn about it, but to be intentional about it. Do I want to make sure that there's greater wealth transfer to my beneficiaries by either doing Roth conversions during my life, doing life insurance, permanent life insurance planning to deal with the Secure Act? Well, it takes a lot of intentionality to do that. With Roth conversions, what do we know? We're going to pay tax, and we have to survive long enough. If we're not using outside assets, we have to survive long enough to survive the hit we're going to take on the income tax of the Roth conversion. If we're going to buy life insurance to deal with the Secure Act, we have to be very intentional to make sure that makes sense financially, that the numbers make sense, that I'm taking assets, let's say, from my IRA or 401k, and I'm going to relocate those assets into life insurance for the purpose of a greater wealth transfer. All of these things take collaboration, they take focus, they take intentionality. So again, I'm preaching to the choir here in some respects, but for those of you who are on this call that really have not really thought about this at this level, just know that this is all about intentionality and monitoring and staying with the advisory team and all of the things that we're going to continue to describe throughout the remainder of the presentation. As we continue this particular subject to the next slide, protecting the shares of beneficiaries from divorce or the claims of creditors. We were talking about leaving IRA shares to trusts. Well, what about non-IRA shares to trusts? This is something a lot of people want to do. You have to be intentional about it. You have to make sure your beneficiary designations are correct. We want to make sure that it makes sense. If we're using a will-based plan and we want those IRAs to go into trust, we may have to check with the custodian to make sure that that custodian will allow that. If we're leaving non-IRA shares to the trust, then we know we don't have that issue, but we need to be intentional. We need to know how those trusts work. We need to know who are going to be the trustees of those trusts, and does that make sense? Should those trustees be interested persons, meaning the beneficiary themselves, or should it be an independent person? You know, these are very, very big issues. Planning successfully for someone with special needs, that needs to be intentional in today's world. Why? Because we have a changing landscape of IRA law, meaning retirement plan law, the Secure Act, and we know that disabled people are exempt. Their special needs trusts are exempt. So we need to be intentional. Planning for a spouse with dementia. I'm switching to elder care planning here as a potential goal for someone, and why knowing what they want to achieve is so important. How do we plan for a spouse with dementia? How do we plan for asset protection in elder law? Well, maybe we're being intentional to start the Medicaid look period by transferring assets outright or to a trust. If we're transferring assets outright, we need to know the risks. If we are transferring assets to a trust, we need to know what that's all about and how will that be developed or managed, and what risks am I taking to make that kind of outright transfer. Planning for a spouse with dementia could also include will planning, where the state of Maryland and the federal government authorized the use of a special type of will provision, and now Maryland has blessed that planning approach, where if the well spouse dies, now the surviving ill spouse is protected, and those assets are protected from a Medicaid spend down. All of these things have to do with goals and intentionality, because not only have we, let's say, decided on that approach at some point, but now we have to be very intentional to make sure it works properly. All the asset alignment, all of those things have to occur, and make sure that that makes sense. Ensuring the care and safety and well-being of parents or grandchildren. So all of these things are goal-driven, intentional items. Now, I'm mentioning this in a special slide. Notice that I've used the word process several times. So process is critically important as opposed to randomness or lack of a process. Again, much more of a philosophical discussion, but something to really take to heart as you're dealing with your advisory team, as you're dealing with your attorney, and as you're talking among your family members. They need to know that unless everyone is on board, your fiduciaries, unless it's all lined up, it does stand a very good chance of failing. So let's talk about the antithesis of process, which is really carelessness. And to whatever extent that I'm repeating myself, I hope that you will forgive me as I try to make my points here today. And my hope is that by having these embedded in your mind, that this will make a difference for you as you deal with your advisors. So lack of a partnership type relationship is a careless mistake that could be conscious or unconscious. So someone who's not educated about this would never know. This has to do with referral selection, attorney selection, advisory team selection, how that all transpires in life, which happens in so many different ways in this country due to our busy lives and how things get done. So we want this partnership type of relationship. If you are a client or a prospective client and you engage in a true partnership relationship with your attorney, you know, and your advisory team, you know you can trust what they're saying, you're working with them towards an intentional goal, and you will feel that, you will know that. And the attorney will know that as well. And if you're not in a partnership relationship, that will also be something that you know. And of course, if you're not in a partnership relationship, that relationship is not worthy of you, and it's not going to work well for your planning. So part of being intentional is to feel and to actually be in a partnership relationship with your estate planning attorney and your advisory team. Carelessness is having estate planning as a one-time transaction. There may be many of you on this call who either executed a will or other documents at some time in your life. You did it because you had young children. You did the right thing. You were naming guardians of those young children, or you had a special reason why you signed a will or powers of attorney. But chances are that was just kind of a one-time thing, and those documents went someplace and you've probably never looked at them, and hopefully you don't need them. But looking at estate planning as a one-time transaction is, in essence, a careless thing to do, whether you realized it or not, and that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid the estate planning process that only really is one-dimensional, and that is a focus on the documents. We don't want that. Lack of a defined purpose. We just talked about many reasons why someone would have a specific reason or purpose for planning. We want to know that our planning is for a definite reason. Without that, your planning is really random. Again, this next bullet point is exactly what I just said. Failure to focus on estate planning as a broad process and a life process, but instead focusing on estate planning as a set of physical documents. So if there's wrong selection, wrong referral, wrong this or that, and the client ends up in front of an estate planning attorney or has no planning team, and that attorney says, well, here's your documents, thank you, and never talks to you again for 20 years, that is not the client's fault. But again, we want to get around that through proper selection, awareness, and education. This gets to the next bullet point, no follow-up or ongoing maintenance of the estate planning. I know I'm to some degree talking about similar things here. No partnership, no relationship, no a multiple transaction process, no multi-step process. Now we have no maintenance. And as the laws change, as we all know, as life changes, as the health situation changes, there's no ongoing maintenance, there's no relationship. So that is carelessness or randomness. No collaborative advisory team. Let's say that you are lucky enough to have an advisory team. You have an estate planning attorney, you have a financial advisor, you have a tax person, a CPA, tax professional, but they don't talk. They've never been introduced. They're not collaborative. I would still argue you still have a very suspect situation. If you intend for your plan to work as you intend, not only now, but at the time of your death, which obviously we have no idea when we will pass away, we want our team to be collaborative. First of all, we want to have a team. We want them to be collaborative, and we want them to talk to each other as part of that collaboration. This is not an easy thing to do, and I'm emphasizing this in this presentation a couple of times. So if you're making notes, put a star beside that. And I think that as clients and prospective clients, you have the right to demand that. You have the right to say, why isn't my team talking? They're all busy. What are they doing for me? Are they meeting about me? Are they collaborating and have notes, cross-firm notes with your permission about me? And are they all working towards my goal, which is I'm being very intentional. No consideration of changes in the laws. This is talking about the ongoing maintenance and updating. No client education. No consideration of unforeseen contingencies. So this is one of the big things I'm talking about with financial powers of attorney and keeping them updated, or the broad provisions in a revocable trust, for example. Incorrect or non-existent beneficiary designations. That is a careless mistake. That can happen with the lack of collaboration. It can happen with a lack of education. It can happen just because someone is being truly careless. Whether it's the person that has a $1.5 million IRA and fails to make a beneficiary designation, doesn't matter how much education this person has, they simply did not check. They simply were careless. Their team, if they have one, was careless. And now all that money is going to be taxed almost immediately within 5 years or less with a failure of a beneficiary designation. This is serious randomness and carelessness. Again, this gets to the issue of no proper asset alignment. Doesn't matter how much wealth a person has, a person can have an estate plan that's not properly aligned. So do we have a spreadsheet of assets? Have we tracked beneficiary designation confirmations? Do we know what is titled in a trust and what isn't? Do we know where assets are flowing, let's say, to a trust or not to a trust? Do we look at that at a glance and know because we're being intentional? Lack of understanding of the effects of non-probate transfers. Many people are not aware that their non-probate transfers will defeat their planning. I spoke to someone the other day who had a wonderful estate plan in place that I was reviewing, but when I looked at their assets, virtually everything was jointly owned, so nothing would actually flow through the estate plan. So lack of understanding about how non-probate transfers actually happen. Again, repeating myself a little bit, poor selection of fiduciaries. This is carelessness or randomness. This can be solved with a process, thinking, and selection, proper selection. No education for the fiduciaries. This is carelessness that leads to estate planning failure and a lack of intentionality. Lack of organization. One of my good financial advisor friends said to me years ago, Steve, you guys are doing a great job with education, but what about organization? And he was absolutely right. And I've never really forgotten that. So we not only want to be educated and educating our clients, and of course, clients should be educated, but we want to be organized. This lack of organization could lead to the beneficiary failures, lack of alignment of assets, and also basically assets being lost, assets not being accounted for. So we want to be organized to avoid randomness. So as I've mentioned throughout, being intentional isn't easy. So I'm going to emphasize this again. If you want an estate plan that actually works, you have to be intentional, not only at the implementation stage, but in the further stages that I'm getting ready to go through. So Jeff, as we head towards the latter part of the presentation, I'm just going to take a sip of water and see if anyone has any questions. I know this is a very non-technical discussion.
Well, thanks, Steve. No questions right now. I am sure they're listening intently, though.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. All right, and thanks everyone for hanging in there through this presentation. Now, let's talk a little bit more about philosophy and this thing I've coined as intentionalism. And I hope to have at least an ebook done, maybe more, on this subject in the next several months or years, next couple of years. So you'll be able to use this as a reference. So Webster's defines intentionality or intentional as something that is done by intention or design. So that's a big word, design process. Having an external reference, So we have in my opinion, what this means, we have a process that's designed and we reference it externally. Synonyms or related words are conscious, deliberate, intended, knowing, and purposeful, powerful words. Antonyms, unintentional and non-deliberate. We certainly want to stay away from that. So if I were to define what I think is an intentional estate plan after all what I've put you through so far, I would describe it as this: a plan that is designed and done with conscious and deliberate intention with a reference to an external process. So I hope that just didn't put you to sleep. And if it didn't, I'll read it again. An intentional estate plan, in my view, is one that is designed and done with conscious and deliberate intention, not only at the beginning, but throughout, with reference to this external broad process. So I hope that will make sense and that's something that you can use. Now, is it possible to have an unintentional estate plan? And the answer is yes. I think that if you take into consideration everything I've said so far and the odds being against you in estate planning, you have to kind of get yourself ready and say, yes, I'm not going to let those odds take over. I'm going to be intentional and beat those odds. So understanding the full importance of this question is the key to understanding the enormous obstacles to successful estate planning. Some of you on this call may think I'm overstating the situation, but I think some of the more experienced people on the call with knowledge about estate planning may agree with me that this is an enormous obstacle to overcome when we consider that planning really should be a lifetime pursuit, and updating and maintenance, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But just know, yes, it is possible to have an unintentional estate plan, and we don't want that. So, how to be intentional as we wrap up towards the end of the presentation. I want you to know what you want and what your goals are. And if you're using this presentation as a worksheet and you're able to put it in your binder or your personal notes and actually think about this on a winter's day or whenever you have time, I want you to think about this. Being intentional is knowing what you want. What do I want out of an estate plan? Using some of the reference point that Steve just gave me in this presentation as a guide. We want to select the correct estate planning attorney or estate planning law firm. Now, we'll talk about the advisory team, but this is critical, okay? This is critical. What is the correct planning team? The correct estate planning law firm is going to be the one that gives you what we're getting ready to describe. We want to engage in a partnership type relationship with that estate planning attorney. We talked about that. I'm trying to tie in those details. You want to expect and participate in an external process that includes education for the client, and not just the client, but also for the fiduciaries. We talked about that in just a few minutes ago. So we want to do all these things, but you should be able to expect this external process. We want to be intentional by aligning estate assets with the plan in coordination with the planning attorney and the financial and tax advisory team. That's being intentional. And you want to commit to maintaining and updating the estate planning on a systematic basis over the years. Now, we're going to talk about that in a little more depth because you'll see that's one of the most important things. And as part of this commitment, you want to participate in a client care program arrangement. You want to be encouraged and you want to accomplish this continuing education on an ongoing basis to make adjustments to the documents, adjustments to the asset alignment as you continue to accumulate assets, adjustments as, God forbid, a disability were to occur, an adjustment if the tax laws change, which they very well may be changing as we speak. All of these things encourage you to be part of a client care program and to commit to maintaining and updating the estate planning over the years. And as we get towards the wrap-up stage here, I would like to take everything I've said, especially in the last few slides, and condense that to the two major intentionality requirements. If you're still with me on this call, I know you're very committed to intentionality, and making things happen in the estate and financial planning and tax planning. These are the two things that I would take away from this discussion. Number one, the most important things in being intentional are a commitment to maintaining and updating the documents as part of the estate planning over the long period of time of your remaining life. And in doing so, participating in a client care program of some kind, a program that encourages you to maintain and update the program, the planning. So let's talk about maintenance and updating. And some of this may seem surprising, but maintenance and updating, now that you know this, now that you're aware that this is an important thing, this is completely within your control. I'm going to just go out here and say, this is something that if you're a client, this is in your control. You now have this understanding that even if you didn't have it before, that if I don't do this, I will not have an estate plan that works. The odds are against me. The odds are against me that my plan will ultimately work the way I want. This maintenance and updating is within your control. And we want to desire and develop a fully functional estate plan, okay? So this is what we want to do. We want to have this desire. You must have this desire as part of the process. You need to recognize the complexities that I've described and how life gets in the way of the updating and maintenance. You need to try to develop an instinctive understanding that this methodical approach is what is going to be required to overcome the inertia of life. And many of you know exactly what I'm saying. Many of you are dealing with aging parents. Maybe you're dealing with aging yourself. You know what life's inertia is like. And for all of those reasons, we want to update at least every 2 years, especially if you're over 50 or 55 years old. And ideally, especially if we're over 60 or 65 years old, we want to update annually. So this doesn't mean you're going to make big changes to your documents annually. It just means that you're going to do a check-in. You're going to get an update on your education. You're going to make minor adjustments. You're going to understand what's going on in the world as it relates to your planning. And many of you do this, as we know, with your tax planning every year and your financial planning. So this is not something new, except if for those of you who do not have a financial advisor or a tax advisor. Now, participating in a client program, a client care program, as opposed to the understanding that you need one, that is completely within your control. The maintenance and updating is completely within your control. But participating in the client care program or some kind of program to make sure that you're updating your documents, that is ultimately not in your control, because you have to find this kind of arrangement. We talked about partnership. You have to be educated enough to know where to go to get this. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, Elville and Associates is only one of two, and my friend Gary Greenwald is another member of the Client Care Program, Client Maintenance Academy. We are the only two people in Maryland that we're aware of that have a client care program. So this is not something that's easy to find. I'm not saying there aren't other programs of various kinds, but a robust educational client care program is very hard to find. So that's ultimately not in your control, but hopefully with this information I've conveyed today, you will be able to gravitate toward an arrangement like that, whoever your planning firm is, and demand and expect that that will happen. And if it's not there, you know that's going to be one of the major impediments to intentionally making your estate plan work. So the burden is on you to seek out and find a law firm that is willing to commit to you to be in the partnership, to be in the educational arrangement, but also the burden is on you to make sure that your advisory team is actually collaborating, or that you develop an advisory team to begin with, not only just your law firm, that all of your advisors are committed to you. They're committed to intentional perfection in your estate planning. So the final dilemma, as I wrap up, is finding this estate planning firm, or like I said, the collaborative team that understands your commitment. If you're on this call this morning and you've spent an hour of your valuable time listening to this discussion, and if this resonates with you, you are a very exceptional person. And I mean that because you are in the minority of people in this country who is committed to this. You understand your commitment, and this firm and collaborative team should understand it. They should be willing to commit to you. They provide you the opportunity and the path to have success in your estate planning. You have to have that path forward so that you can do what you instinctively know you will have to do, and provide you the opportunity to achieve success, provides a comprehensive program or path to run on to encourage this maintenance and updating and education, provides a repetitious program and alignment of assets to revisit, and as a couple of attorneys I used to know say, take a second bite at the apple to make sure that all the assets that we intended to get aligned are properly aligned and all the pieces are in place. This person or firm or collaborative team that you're looking for is someone or something that provides continuous client education not only of you and your family, but of the fiduciaries involved, encourages family participation, holds social events to make this kind of information more fun. I think these are the ideal things that should happen. Collaborates and encourages collaboration, as I've said many, many times, with your financial advisors and tax advisors, and provides ancillary services as well to keep you informed of the resources that are available to you in the community and in the country. So as I wrap up, I know you have the commitment or you wouldn't be on this call. You are the hero of your own story. And as we know in the lore, I should say, of the hero's journey, you are setting out on a journey. If you've never done this before, if you've had estate planning and it's not worked, or the relationships or the idea or the feeling that you have about your estate planning has just not felt what it's supposed to be to you, you're setting out on this journey to find perfection. You're setting out on a journey to get your collaborative team and your law firm that's worthy of you together. And that's what I'm challenging you to do. And that's what I'm saying I understand that you want to do. And now the burden is on you to engage and to participate and to expect perfection from your collaborative team as you pursue perfection and intentionality in your estate planning throughout the rest of your life, so that your planning works the way that you're supposed to. So what is estate planning really about? And I'm going to let you look at this for a few seconds. After all of this discussion, is estate planning about documents? Well, a little bit. Is it about laws? Yes, certainly. Is it about taxes? For many people, certainly, especially right now. Is it about asset protection? Yes. Is it about processes? Yes. Is it about magic words? And when I say that, I mean including the proper provisions in the documents. Of course it is, and all the proper drafting. But I'm going to argue that what estate planning really is about love. Estate planning, in my view, is about great love, because it is you that is setting forth this effort, this idea that you're going to provide for your loved ones and yourself for the future, to set out your goals, your values, your aspirations, your caring, your passion, your hope, and your ideas for the future. So you've been a great group. I thank you for joining today and listening to me. I am wrapping up here in just about an hour or less, which is a little bit shorter than we normally do. But I'm going to leave you with the thought that your journey is beginning today. If you would like to have your documents reviewed, or like to talk about this idea of intentionality and being purposeful, we'd like you to feel free to meet with us, complete a planning questionnaire. We want you to relax. We want you to know there's nothing to fear. Here in our 3 conference rooms in Columbia, for example, you have complete quiet and confidentiality in the discussions. And if you don't have an advisory team, we want to help you form one. We want to talk about any questions or concerns that you have, and you could prepare those questions and concerns, and we want to give you the time to think. We just want to encourage you that yes, you can move forward and you do have a path forward. So I thank you, and Jeff, I'm going to turn it back to you, and I look forward to meeting all of you, or certain of you who may want to speak with me, or you may have further questions. And again, I thank you for your attendance. Jeff, turning it back over to you.
Steve, thank you very much. I'm typically not speechless, but I'm speechless right now. That was great.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. I know that's something that's near and dear to Steve, and it's near and dear to me. What we do here at Elville and Associates on a daily basis, working with and caring for clients, means a lot. And so I hope that presentation resonated with you as much as it did for me. And I know Steve enjoyed offering that, his thoughts to you. So with all that said, now will be your time to get your questions in, if you have any. We do have a couple of thoughts here, Steve, and a couple of questions here I want to run by you here briefly. We do have a request to please, if you will, if you could jump back a few slides and show the slide that defines intentional estate planning, please.
All right, I will. Thank you.
Might be back a little bit.
All right. Getting there.
Let's see if we can find that.
I think this might be what the person is asking about, Jeff, this last bullet point.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, thank you. And Joan, if that's not the right one, please let me know, but I think that's what we're looking for. So just put that up there for a few seconds here. And I'll actually, we can just leave that up and I'll get to the next thought. So this is a thought actually from one of our real great advisor friends, Joe Sperling. Joe Sperling Insurance, wonderful friend of the firm, wonderful advisor, known for a long time, and we appreciate his partnership with the firm. He had a thought. I just wanted to share it. Steve's presentation is absolutely brimming with critically important guidance, much of which is not intuitive. We need experienced and dedicated guides to help us point out and avoid the landmines that lurk in the world of estate planning. Thank you for this hugely useful presentation. Well, thank you very much, Joe. We appreciate that very much. Always appreciate your kind words, Joe, and what you bring to our webinars as well. Let's see here. So Joan, the person that asked you to bring up that slide, now asks, what is meant by external process?
Yes, I think where I'm going with that's a great question, is that
I'm sorry, Steve, not to interrupt. Sure. She said, I meant reference to an external process.
Yes, I think where I'm just going there is I'm just taking off from the definition in Webster's dictionary and really just extrapolating on that and saying that an intentional plan, of course, we do it with deliberate intention, but we are referencing a guide, right? It's like I'm going to this may or may not be a great analogy, but I'm going to do an oil painting, right? Well, you could just paint organically, or you could paint with reference to kind of a pre-drawing. You know, some artists would pencil in a drawing and then apply the oil paint. Some writers, for example, would organically, like Stephen King reputedly has done, write novels and just organically write them with no outlines. But just intuitively move forward. And if it doesn't go in the right direction, he just throws it in the trash can and starts again. Here, I'm talking about really having this process in mind, a process of, okay, here's how the planning actually works. Here's what we're going to do in the process of the planning. We're going to meet several times. We're going to discuss certain aspects of the planning. We're going to talk about the various types of choices that are available to clients today in planning as part of a defined process. Then, and at the end of that process, we do the funding and alignment. And at the end of that, we do the maintenance and updating over the years to come. In other words, reference to an actual estate planning process rather than just kind of going through the motions and then really not understanding where we come out at the end. And another good example of that is in estate and trust administration. If someone dies with a will, there's a process that the Register of Wills has. That process is in writing about what has to happen. And in trust administration, there are processes about ideally what should happen after someone dies and a certain set of process. So that's what I'm referring to as an actual external process. And if the law firm or if the advisory team really doesn't have a planned process, then we're kind of dealing with that carelessness or randomness.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So that looks like those are our questions for now. I'll just end by saying thank you for being here today. In my post-webinar email that I typically send out, I will send out the video for today's presentation if you want to reference it or share it with friends and family. And I'll also want to share with you that we do have a busy couple weeks for our Elville webinar series. Next Tuesday, we start our wellness series with Miss Ellen Platt, an aging life care manager with the Option Group, and Dr. Michelle Fritsch of Retirement Wellness. And they're going to be talking about wellness during uncertainty. And we have a lot of people signed up for that, part one of our wellness series. We're really looking forward to that and encourage you to check out the invitation that you may have received, or you can go to our website's events calendar and sign up there. And Friday the 24th, Steve's going to be back talking about estate planning and elder law essentials, which we always like to bring back at least once every month or two to reinforce those, and always have more people come to see those for the first time or revisit them to reinforce those. And on Wednesday, the 29th, we'll be talking about a relatively new topic, charitable giving and philanthropy, which Steve is going to be talking about. So we're looking forward to that. We've had many requests for that topic for a while, so we're happy to be offering that through the webinar series as well. I'll also share with you a little bit of information about our client care program, which we've alluded to many times here during today and our webinar series as a whole. So I'll send a link to you just to give you an idea of what actually is part of our client care program. Well, I'll go ahead and send you the link. It's a nice link that has a lot of information, has a couple of videos on there as well, and you can get a feel for what is actually part of that program as well. So let me see if we have any final questions, and then we'll wrap up. And Jen says, thank you, that was very helpful, Steve. So thank you for that response.
You're welcome.
So I think we're all set. So thank you for being here today. Hope you all have a great rest of the week. And thank you for being part of our presentation today. Thanks for a great job, Steve. And hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.